okay, well, what happens when you can't recover and the ransomware went after your backups and now I don't have that? That was probably outside of the realm of what the ransomware was going to go after.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, certainly ransomware is getting significantly more sophisticated. We're talking specifically about WannaCry right now.
Yeah.
That was a very unsophisticated attack.
Very unsophisticated.
Right? It was designed specifically to go after fairly low-hanging fruit.
Welcome to the Prosiliency Podcast, aka DR in a Bar. The Prosiliency Podcast is an irreverent, profane, and always real look at life and technology from both inside and outside the data center. Now, here are your heart-stomping, pants-dropping, earthquaking, booty-shaking, and love-making hosts, Vince Vaughn and Eddie Perez.
All right. Well, thank you, Anna the Prize Girl. Welcome to another edition of the Prosiliency Podcast. With me is Eddie Perez. Eddie, say hello, Eddie.
Hello, how are you doing?
Very good. And then, so we got Eddie Perez, and we also got a very special guest. But before I introduce him, I got a very special way I want to introduce this man. So in ancient America, there's a legend that one day a child would be born from a dragon, grow to be a man, and vanquish hackers and enable zero RPOs and RTOs throughout the land. That man is not Tom Seitler, who is our current guest, because Tom Seitler schooled that guy.
I'm not sure if I'm really deserving of that particular introduction there, but what I'm thinking is maybe I should pay you to go around and introduce me before every presentation from this point forward.
That is awesome. So yeah, we've got Tom Seitler, a very highly respected disaster recovery professional who specializes in backup and recovery software, joining us today. And we're going to talk about WannaCry, WannaCrypt. Basically, all the bullshit that happened starting last Friday that disrupted a lot of companies, a lot of lives, and a lot of jobs, for sure.
A lot of jobs.
So, but before we do that, where are we at, Eddie?
Well, we're at the World of Beers in New Orleans at the VMON conference.
We're at the VMON conference in New Orleans.
Where great people work.
That's true. I have to say that's absolutely the case.
I would have to agree as well.
There you go. So, and you know, so this is our second podcast in New Orleans.
Yes.
We've only podcasted in two cities, basically Kansas City, New Orleans, and here we are.
You know there are other places, right?
I know, I do.
Actually, Kansas City, Kansas, and we did Missouri. So really 3 places.
That's true. That's absolutely the case.
I'm going to go with that's a little bit of a stretch.
It is a little bit, slightly, absolutely. So, but you know what to say about New Orleans? In every other city in the world, you live there. But in New Orleans lives in you.
Oh.
I read that today, so.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. I actually worked here in New Orleans for almost 7 years, so it's I'm trying to figure out if that's true or not. I guess I did not.
I know you, Tom.
Did not live here, so I only worked here. I actually lived quite far out of the city, so.
I know you, Tom, and I can absolutely say there's a little bit of New Orleans inside you. I can tell.
I'm not as sure about that, but I still like it. I still like getting back down
here. It is.
Here.
It's great, right? It's a great town.
Absolutely.
And so we're at the World of Beer, and this is a great bar because it serves
Beer?
a world of beer. There's a lot of beer. So we're all got our own beers. Eddie, what are you trying today?
I'm going to try the Yingling traditional lager from Pennsylvania, which Vince told me was the oldest brewery in the United States.
It is, and this is a staple beer on the East Coast. So on the East Coast, you will find Yingling everywhere. You won't find it in the Midwest and typically where we live. But this would be like the Bud Light for like the Eastern Seaboard.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna test it and see what happens. And I actually decided to go with a lager, which I don't like beer, so this is always a good test for me.
Yeah, very good.
So let me test this bad boy out
Yeah,
here.
let's do it.
I don't know. It tastes like a beer.
Okay, very good.
So
Well, that's always a good start.
So, and when I say that it's kind of like when you eat a piece of chicken that just tastes like chicken. You're not like Cajun style, or it's just a beer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's as neutral beer as you can get.
This is probably why it's like a staple on the Eastern
because
Seaboard.
it's just
It's the Bud Light of the Eastern
right,
Seaboard.
and you're correct on that. Like I could drink that, even though It looks like dirty water from the Missouri River.
Yes.
I would say that though it's
That's the highlight of a good beer.
right, and I would actually drink a lot of these.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm gonna give it. If I was giving it the Vince Vaughn rating,
Yeah.
the VBV value, whatever. DVV actually V3.
The V cubed.
The V cubed rating of 7.69.
This sounds like
Two.
such a specific rating.
This is
Our rating.
Yeah.
It's a rating system. We changed it.
Perhaps I should have listened to this podcast more before I came on here to understand this
That's true
complex
for
rating
everybody,
system.
Tom, not just you.
Yeah, that's why you go last.
So, so very good, Eddie. Thank you very much. So, I'm actually trying the Abita Strawberry Harvest. I decided to go a little fruity. So, you've been going fruity lately. I decided to do my own fruity little beer. So, I'm going to try it. I actually like fruity beers, so I expect to like this too. Hold on. It's good. It's not a sour. Like a lot of like fruity beers are kind of sour beers. This is not that way at all.
So it's opposite of what usually has happened. Usually you say it's going to be a good beer, and it sucks. Or
Yeah.
you say it's going to suck, and it's good.
Yeah.
So this is the first time you've
This
actually
is-
liked what you thought you were going to like.
This is a really good beer. So it's almost like they made a beer and then they just they just squeezed a little strawberry into each glass. I mean, it's not overpowering at all. It's an awesome beer, man. This is
I've
a
never
good beer.
seen you cheek so much over a beer. It actually might give you rainbows.
I'm going to give this it's not my favorite beer I've ever had in the podcast. That was the Torn Label Monk and Honey, but this was awesome. I'm going to give this a 7.98.
7.98.
Yeah, not quite an 8, but really, really close. This is a great beer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I might have to try that later.
So very good. Mr. Seitler, what are you drinking today?
So I'm going to try to remember what I'm drinking. I believe it was the North Coast Old Rasputin
Yeah, perfect.
Imperial
Absolutely.
Style. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, look at that. I actually got it right. So I'm a relative beer neophyte when it
Yeah.
comes to that stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah, very
I
good.
don't know if I'll give you the fancy analysis that you guys have been able to
I
pull
get it.
off
I
here.
understand. That's all right.
So,
Well,
it's
first,
beer.
did you like it?
Yes, it's good.
What did you like about it? What's the taste inside that beer? Can you give me that?
I don't know. I felt like there's almost a smoky taste, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
A little bit, not super bitter, but a little bit in there.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was pretty smooth overall.
Yeah,
And
cool.
I really liked it.
Awesome.
What I would rate it, that part's tougher. I don't understand your guys' rating system. If I was rating on a scale of 0 to 10, based on 10 being the perfect beer for
Yeah.
me,
You don't have to get to the decimals.
So
You
let
can
me
just keep it
let me go
simple.
down to like. I'll say this is probably a 6.95.
So
6.95. That's
so
a
what
good
that
beer.
usually means is that it's you would order it and you wouldn't be upset that you ordered it.
That's about where
But
this
it's
is
not
at.
something that you're like, oh my gosh, that would be my go-to. Your go-to is between 7 and 8. Your 9 is like, Vince, you got to drink this beer. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you would think right around there.
For me, this is definitely it's on the menu and they're out of my favorite one, so
Yeah.
it's a good second option.
I love it. That's perfect. Awesome. Nicely done, gents. Cheers. Okay, so shit, man, all hell broke loose last Friday.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't have Windows XP.
Well, you know what's interesting about this particular thing with WannaCry, WannaCrypt is of all the disaster I've ever heard of, this is, to me, the most preventable. This could have easily been prevented with updates and patches.
Yeah.
And it
Says
shows,
the person who didn't get it.
says the person who didn't get it.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with this particular deal, I think it shows how vulnerable the data centers are and how little they spend time updating and patching their servers.
And in-user devices.
And in-user devices, absolutely.
Because it's just, you have a lot of people that are outside of their area that they don't really care about. I mean, how many people actually back up their end-user devices, right? They just think of it as, oh, who cares? They'll put on a file share.
Yeah.
But you do know that your access to your server or your laptop has access to the server network. And if you're a server admin, now you have access to their internal network too. So it really starts to trickle down.
Yep. So, Tom, let me ask you this. How do you, when you talk to customers, and I know you talk to the biggest customers in the world, what do you tell them when you're telling them, like, what are the specific practices you give them to guard against ransomware?
Well, the number one challenge that you have with ransomware today is that not only does it get into your environment and because it causes a lot of damage, but a lot of people are using disk-based backups, and disk-based backups are also vulnerable to ransomware as well.
Yep.
So probably the number one thing we talk about when they begin to discuss ransomware is how can I keep that separate backup, some other solution that's not online, something that that my ransomware can't actually reach so easily.
Yep.
We do spend a lot of time also talking about protecting and separating off the actual backup environment from the rest of the environment, because it's amazing how many times the backup environment lives right in the management network with everything else.
Oh,
so that's another big issue.
Absolutely.
But really, just making sure you have backups that are separate from, offline. I mean, you could say air gap, right? I mean, you hear sometimes the term air gap. I've actually seen a lot of big customers that had previously said no more tape. Suddenly, tape's back in the door. Tape's almost, I won't say cool, because it'll never be cool, but it's there again.
Hey,
how about that?
Well, I have to say,
it brings a level of safety to the table.
Well, I was at the VMon conference not very long, like an hour ago, and I was talking to an IBM rep, and one of the guys I used to know at a previous job, and he had the tape library. People were still looking at the robot, moving it up, so it's still cool. And he goes, it's actually interesting that now I'm having today a lot more conversations about it, and we actually talked about this a little bit ago about having one offline copy that's not accessible so easily, can corrupt it so quickly. And I think that's a really good point that you're saying, is making sure it is coming back. And I wonder if this might actually create a new media type that people aren't thinking about to protect against ransomware.
Like what?
I don't know. Some type of self-heating media, and again, that worm technology, something that is the new age of data protection. Memory-based, maybe. I don't know. Something that's you can lock down maybe a little bit easier.
I guess to a little bit of that, I've also seen people begin to think that maybe they weren't using stored snapshots before, and suddenly stored snapshots become a secondary way that you can protect against this problem.
Yeah.
Maybe they were like, oh, well, I don't want to spend.
That's a different kind of media,
invest,
right?
Right. I don't want to invest the money into the extra space that snapshots take. But then, okay, well, what happens when you can't recover and the ransomware went after your backups and now I don't have that? But if I've got a stored snapshot, that was probably outside of the realm of what the ransomware was going to go after.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, certainly ransomware is getting significantly more sophisticated. We're talking specifically about WannaCry right now.
Yeah.
That was a very unsophisticated attack.
Very unsophisticated.
Right? It was designed specifically to go after fairly low-hanging fruit.
Wasn't that the same thing that, not ransomware, but before that with Trojan virus, with the love virus? Where, remember back when they did the virus, they had the love and they had those emails, and it would attack people's systems that were not patched up at all. I was at a big healthcare company, and if you didn't have your thing patched up when it was Windows XP, and it hit all the love hit out, if you were patched up, you were fine. They essentially showed a vulnerability, like you said, that has been out and people have used for years, but they were able to use the technology of how fast the internet can spread. Before, it used to be an email, and maybe you're going over the big companies had 100 meg pipe, right? And you were like, man, huge. I was at a healthcare company, we're like 200 meg, what? And now it's like 1 gigabit all over the place. Now the ability for that to spread quickly is huge, if you really think about it, the accessibility of that.
Well, especially when you consider, like, and you had mentioned this yesterday, so I'm going to seed this a little bit for you. Think about locks on a door. There are some very sophisticated locks now that you can use. Heck, you can unlock your door from your mobile device even. But, that's been an evolution. Before, one way to lock your door is just to have a little ring on one side, a little hook on the other, and just put it there. And people were like, that didn't secure us enough. We needed to update. We needed to. to upgrade the locks we have on our doors because there are people who actually want to come in and steal our stuff, do bad things to us. We don't want that to happen. So we've got to improve the door and we've got to improve the locks.
Yeah.
What this did is highlighted how many people basically have that little hook and that little ring to stick inside that door to keep their stuff safe.
And people want to put their head in the sand, and they just didn't want to do anything because it took time, and management didn't want to help them spend money.
So-
And I don't know if you're seeing anything like that or what you're
I
seeing.
actually want to ask you a question about that, because I feel like maybe to a certain extent we're doing a little victim shaming, right? Okay, it was definitely the people.
We totally are.
It was definitely
Totally
the
are.
people.
Hey, it's never our fault.
No,
This is a
but wait a
presentation.
minute. Is there any responsibility in the vendor of the software? Because, for example, a lot of this vulnerability was in older operating systems that were not. That patches weren't even available for, right?
Well,
Windows
they haven't-
XP.
well, they do no
Now,
more
you can
software
say,
update
you
for
can,
it.
You can say that. Well, you can say that users are responsible for that, right? That they should have upgraded, but that's not as easy in the real world as it is to say on a podcast.
Yeah,
Right. There are systems that are embedded that are doing MRIs in hospitals. There are systems that really, as a user, I don't really have that much control over, and yet they've been infected by this too.
Yeah.
So
I
I
think-
wonder if maybe sometimes we give a little blame.
Well, I think when we've talked about it, it's always been, it's not just the IT person, it's also leadership, right? And the vendors, at some point you got to figure out how far back do I keep supporting down to Windows 3.1. If you get hacked in your 3.1 Windows, right, and you're doing back in the day and you get hacked, at some point it becomes a vendor, but once they've telling you like, hey, we're not going to support this anymore, here's the new stuff, here we want to do it, and they've educated them and they still do that, you as a business though need to realize, okay, we're putting our customers at risk, so we need to really invest in the newest technology, because technology is taking in and making things better. Like from the healthcare perspective, people will go into the next technology of healthcare vending. People have like old generation, the next generation, and it's all built around the newest technologies, newest security. If you're still using SSH and you don't want to update it and you don't want to use that technology, it's you as a business to make sure where am I going to put those investments, but also as a vendor to make sure that they're patching them up quickly. But you can't tell them to patch their system if they don't want to do it, right? And that's the hard part.
How far back do you think a vendor should go to support an operating system, like in Microsoft's case?
Okay, Microsoft is a difficult challenge because obviously they're so widespread. There's still tens of millions of Windows XP systems. I believe that should still be supportable, at least because there are systems out there that were built on Windows that it's very difficult for the automation vendor to update, right? If I have a CNC milling machine in my manufacturing facility that's run on Windows XP, is that ever going to be upgraded? That machine costs millions of dollars. If Microsoft can't provide a way to support that, and the vendor can't easily upgrade that platform, then that's a lot of money for me as a business. It's not just about the patches. The business has to make that decision.
So, Windows XP came out in 2001.
Sure.
And as a result, if you have a system that you built specifically on XP and you can't upgrade it, I want to know why you can't upgrade a system that in 2017 that was on an operating system that was built in the early 2000s.
It's a good point, and I suppose maybe some of it could you question whether Windows is the right platform for even building these machines with.
Sure, yeah.
But once they're built, once they're out there, I mean, maybe I'm leaning too much to my manufacturing background, but we had hundreds of these types of systems. It wasn't one or two or 5 or 10. So it wasn't one CNC milling machine that was $1 million. It was millions upon millions of dollars with hardware that is going to run XP for the life of that hardware.
First of all, you're absolutely right. We're doing a lot of victim shaming here, but I mean, I do think that the people who got hit, it's not what just happened to them. What happened to them is a great story for the rest of us.
Yeah.
You know, because we live in a world, whether it's right or wrong, we live in a world where vendors won't support their operating systems.
That's true. We do live in that world.
And as a result, this could be the wake-up call. This could be the wake-up call that says, okay, I need to take ransomware seriously because it's happened. Now it's happening on a daily basis. Go ahead.
And well, disasters, data centers, people would usually get multiple data centers because they were worried about their data center crashing. An average data center, I don't know, and I've seen this before, is like one every 10 years, like you might have a data center issue, like a massive data center issue. And hopefully it's that long, right? But a ransomware is happening every day. And the probability of you hitting it is so much more within 6 months than it is in 10 years, right? Of your whole data center dying. So one thing that we talked about yesterday at lunch was we wanted to make sure that even if you know the technology at the endpoint before is not going to help you, there are technologies out there that can be put in during something is happening. There's 3 stages you should have protection in a resiliency strategy. One should be before, which would be the patching of it. 2, if something does happen, how can I stop the proliferation? Oh, I used a big word of that, right? You know me, I'm not favorite words. And 3, what happens if to fix those issues and to make sure it's not there? So there are companies that like FireEye, other things like that will actually stop that and see patterns and stop those type of traffics from proliferating. And I think that's key is even if you do have those technologies, then if you know that you're stuck there, you need to then invest in how, if it does get infected, or how do I stop it from being infected? Do I put it on a separate network? Do I make sure that this is segregated out where it is a closed off network and I have to do it the old school way of updating, which is fine, like what sheriff departments and things might do so hackers can't go in and mess up evidence. So there are things that if they are designed on that, you need to understand those risks and put technology in the right place to be most successful.
So
right?
look, you finally got it. You I shouldn't say finally. You managed to get to the answer that I was actually kind of looking for, because I do think that's a huge part of the problem is people have to recognize the risk. If they may have to live with this older technology, but they have to recognize that risk. And I do think some people also just do have maybe not as aggressive of an attitude toward updates as they should.
Right.
That's not the point. But it is much more difficult in the real world than it seems.
Yeah.
And you have to plan for that outside of just your patching cycle, but also this is my reality that I have to live with. I can implement layers of security to protect me against this. So great.
That's awesome. So I think we got to the South Park ending. You know, the end of South Park, it's always, what did we learn today? So I feel like we got to that part. I think you guys arrived at it. Awesome episode. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. And we'll talk to you next time.
All right, thanks.
This has been a Passage Digital presentation. Remember to back that shit up.
If you like this podcast, there are plenty of ways you can support it. First, you may friend us on LinkedIn. Our profile links are in the show notes, or you may share it on other forms of social media or discuss it on your own blog or podcast. Second, we view this as your show, so contact us and ask us for a question we can use, or simply let us know how you feel, good or bad, on how we can improve it. Third, rate us in the app stores and leave us reviews. If you hate us, feel free to 1-star that shit. But remember, 5 stars give you total consciousness on your deathbed, so you have that going for you, which is nice. And lastly, please visit us on the web at prosiliency.com, prosiliency.com.